Welcome to Leadership Unfiltered, the podcast where real leaders get real about what it takes to succeed in today's fast-paced corporate world. I'm Dr. Dayan Douse, founder and president of P.R.I.D.E Consulting, a human behavior and development company serving as an executive coach and facilitator, working with organizations to deliver practical ways to evolve teams, advance organizations, and transform cultures. I hold a PhD in organization and management with over 2 decades of leadership experience in Fortune 500 companies. And I'm best-selling co-author of the book, Nothing But Net. I'm joined by my co-host, Phillip Smith. And Phillip is a seasoned technology executive with extensive experience leading large-scale engineering teams and driving digital transformation. Over his 25 years of leadership experience, he has held multiple roles from supervisor to vice president. His personal brand is coder by blood, architect by trade, and leader by choice. Every episode will deliver real-world strategies, unfiltered advice, and the tools you'll need to take your leadership to the next level. Let's get started.
Today, we're going to talk about building a culture of accountability. And accountability is an important word when it comes to leadership and culture. But oftentimes it can get confused with responsibility. And those are two different things. Responsibility can be shared. Responsibility is a sense of making sure that you're committed to seeing it through. Responsibility is, do you have an oar in your hand? And are you willing to row? That's a sense of responsibility. Accountability is a sense of ownership. It's a sense of that there's decision-making rights and there are consequences that go along with those decision-making rights. And so accountability cannot be shared. Responsibility absolutely can be shared, but accountability cannot be. Accountability is being the captain. Everyone can have an oar in their hand, to stretch the metaphor to the point where it might be breaking, but only one person can captain the ship. And so it's really important that as we talk about accountability, that we kind of get our definitions kind of in alignment.
Mm-hmm. That's good. We use those words interchangeably, which is why I'm glad you draw the distinction here, because our topic today is on accountability.
Yes.
And we'll weave some responsibility language in here. It's really critical that we pull those things apart. Although you will hear people use them interchangeably, they are not the same. And so what you want is for people to be responsible.
Yes.
You would love to have a team full of responsible individuals, because that makes your job that much easier as a leader. But there's many reasons why people don't take responsibility for a certain thing. Mm-hmm. And you know when they're not taking responsibility, because you will hear language like they are laying blame on other people on their team, the organization, you name it. It is someone else's fault, not theirs. They will justify why a certain problem or situation exists, basically telling you a really cool story. And as a leader, I thank them for the story, because I love stories. A good story is just a good story. But I remind them after that wonderful story that we still have a problem that exists, and the story didn't explain that away. And there's a difference between justification and explaining. When I'm justifying, I'm trying to get rid of the problem. When I'm explaining, I'm really just trying to give the details and some insight, understanding that the problem still exists.
Yes.
So those are some distinctions there. And there's other language that will let you know as a leader that you have a team that's not taking responsibility. So appreciate you drawing that distinction.
And as we grow, and as we, explore this topic of accountability, which, as you said, is very distinctive from responsibility, and creating that culture of accountability, it's so important that we have that distinction and people understand the distinction, because if you have a strong sense of responsibility and you begin to have the conversation about accountability without that clarity, it can get confusing.
Yes.
And so one of my experiences around this has been leading parts of a team where there was a high level of responsibility. Mm-hmm. People leaned in, people helped, people picked up the oar. People would absolutely give 110% because they cared. But when you ask the question, okay, who made this decision? There was crickets. When it was around, okay, when it's time to either receive reward or time for the consequences of the decision, again, crickets. And so you can have situations where there's a high level of responsibility, but low levels of accountability. And that does not create the environment for success. That does not create the environment for excellence. You need both. You need high level of responsibility and clear accountability. Yes. And folks willing to say, yes, I am the accountable person for that. And so accountability is important, and it is the leader's responsibility. Ooh. To make the accountabilities clear.
Ooh, you say that again.
One more again for the people in the back.
For the people in the back.
It is the leader's responsibility to ensure that accountabilities are clear. Mm-hmm. And so when I step into a team, when I have been leading a team, that was one of the things that I sussed out very quickly. It's like, where are the accountabilities? And oftentimes they aren't clear. And if you're looking at any of the lean tools or any of the management tools, right? What you're trying to do is drive decision making down into the organization to the point of activity. So the people who have the most information are the ones making the decisions. You cannot have that happen without having clear accountabilities. That can never happen. Because if you don't have clear accountabilities, the person who's accountable is you. Mm-hmm. You as the leader end up holding all the accountabilities, and you as the leader end up making all the decisions. Mm-hmm. And if that's the culture and the environment that you want, then by all means. But if you're looking to have excellence, if you're looking for very fast decision making, if you're looking for your team to be enabled and your team to feel empowered, then you have to make the accountabilities clear, and they have to stick. Meaning, when someone on your team makes a decision that you disagree with, that you believe is the wrong decision, but you've given that person accountability, you cannot undo it. Mm-hmm. You can't. Because you can't undermine their accountability. Mm-hmm. Because your role is to make the accountabilities clear. And so if you undo it, you've just made it murky again. Now the trick is that person may have made a mistake. Right? Now you won't know until the results come in whether or not they did. But you definitely cannot undo the decision because you disagree with it. What you have to do from an accountability perspective is let the results come in. And once the results come in, then you have the opportunity to provide the coaching if need be. Mm-hmm. And that is when you were able to go back. And so I'll tell a quick story. I was an architect, and had a lead developer. And this lead developer decided to bring in this new framework that I was like, this is not right. But I'd given that accountability. I said, yes, go forward. Do what you believe is the right answer. And they did what they thought was the right answer. And I thought it was the wrong answer. But I waited for the results to come in. And it worked. It absolutely worked.
Wow.
It did not work the way that I thought it would work. And it definitely didn't work the way that I thought it should work.
Yes.
But it worked. I could not argue with the results.
Yes.
And that was very difficult for me to keep my mouth shut. That's very hard. And when you have authority, which again is different than accountability.
Yes.
When you have authority, because that's what allows you to give the accountability is your authority. When you have it, it's so easy to use it. And what you have to do is not, because your role as the leader is to ensure that the accountabilities are clear and not to murky them by inserting your, at that moment in time, was my opinion.
Yeah. Yes. That's good. That's good. Wow. I think about creating that culture and what it took. So I've been on a team, I've led a team that were highly responsible individuals, but that culture of accountability was there. And it started with agreement within that team that we wanted accountability as part of our core values for that team. And so that took some discussion on what that looked like, what that felt like within the team. And so we actually posted that agreement and a model to remind us of how we would operate in that agreement in the room that we would hold our team meetings, as a reminder that this is what we all agree to would be our culture for how we would create this accountability. And when I tell you my role as a leader was that much easier, where not only did you have individual responsible people, but that culture then allowed them the space, the safe space to call each other on the results, right? And so when something was off track, before I could lean in and say, you know, what happened, what are we doing, who was responsible, who's accountable for this, their team would lean in and say, hey, wait a minute, time out. I thought you were handling that. And they'd say, yeah, you got me. Right? Yes, it was me, right? And then I could then provide the coaching. So it left me an opportunity and safe space to coach as a leader, but the accountability was everybody in the room. And so if you're trying to create that culture of accountability, make it part of an agreement that this is how you want to operate, that it becomes part of your core values. That gives people the safe space. And it actually, again, if the stakes weren't too high and we weren't too far off the rails with the results, it was actually kind of fun. It was not a finger pointing and poking people in the eye and saying, aha, you missed it. It was really a team environment that said, you were accountable for this. We missed what we intended, but now as a team, we're going to pick it up and fix it, right? That was the fun, the engaging, the love that we had as a team, that we shared as a team, because we had that that space. And so that's just a reminder of what that culture looks like when it's good.
Yeah, and I think what you clearly articulated was, how do you know when you have it?
Mm-hmm.
What does it look like when you have it?
Yes.
And one of the steps that you talk about on the way to get there is that common language.
Mm-hmm.
Like creating a language where people can use.
Yes.
And that's so important.
Yes.
To say, okay, the agreement is we value accountability. And there are many companies and teams that say that. But what does that translate into? What does that actually mean? And so then you have to go into what you said, which was really clearly say, here are the rules of engagement. Mm-hmm. Here's how we're going to hold each other accountable. Here's the language we can use. Here's the settings that it can be applied in. And then your role as the leader is reinforcing that. Mm-hmm. And you have it when it isn't the leader that's doing it, it's the team doing it together.
Yes.
And it's so valuable when people feel that when you are able to link what we were talking about earlier, because the people that are saying, hey, didn't you have that? They're showing their responsibility.
Right.
What they're showing is, hey, not only do I have my oar, but I'm looking at that oar that you have in your hand, and like it could use some wax.
Yes.
And I think the holding each other accountable, that is a high level of maturity. And I've only worked in a handful of teams that got to that level of maturity.
Yes.
And when you have it, it's magic.
Yes.
It's really, really good.
Yes.
But what I have found, which has been fascinating to me, is the higher I've gotten into the organization, the less it is.
That is fascinating.
It's fascinating that you would assume, one would assume, or maybe I just assumed, that the level of accountability, not responsibility, right? But the level of accountability, that sense of ownership, and I'm steering the ship, and yes, I'm willing to make the decision, and yes, I'm willing to accept both the good and the bad that comes from making those decisions, that would increase as you went higher in the organization. And what I found is that it's just not the case.
Yeah.
There was so much more, well, that's not me. Well, that person did that, or that team did that. Well, that team didn't do that. And I find it, as a person who is inherently responsible and possibly over accountable, I will take the decision-making rights and the consequences for things that maybe I shouldn't.
Yeah.
I find that fascinating. And and I think it stems from that underlying trust that is required. And I think as you rise in an organization and as the stakes get higher, as you were talking about, that the frameworks that exist that could be helpful, there isn't that unifying structure. So like when you're in a project and you're trying to go after that one thing and you know what the win looks like and you're all pulling on that together, it's easier to put that framework in place. As you go higher in an organization and it gets less tactical and more strategic and less tomorrow and more 3 to 5 years from now, it gets harder to pull that together and say, here's why we're all together. Here's the thing that we're all working on. Here's all the things. Here's why we're rooting. Here's what the win looks like for all of us. And I think that's underneath it. But that's what I found just fascinating, is that the culture of accountability exists more lower in the organization than it does higher in the organization.
Yes. Wow. That is fascinating. And true. I found that as well in coaching some of the executives. And the part that I always find interesting is they're missing the agreement piece. Right? And so it's hard, not impossible, to hold someone accountable without an agreement. And when I say it's not impossible is because people, so a good example, there's a decision that has to be made. As the leader, you come in and you pose that decision, you discuss that with the team. And you say, all right, give me some feedback, what do you think about going in this direction? And there's silence. And I said, okay, so then this is the decision. And the decision goes forward, and it turns out to not be what the team was expecting. And they'll come back, and the feedback is, well, why did we make that decision? Or why did you make that decision? And I'll say, well, we made that decision. They said, well, I never agreed to that. And I have to remind folks, particularly at higher ranks, that silence is agreement. So if you're going to sit on your hands and not lean into the decision and think, well, I'm not going to voice or have an opinion on this at all, and therefore I'm not in it, you not saying anything, I'm going to hold you accountable for that. And so, just because you're in the C-suite does not mean you get to be silent and not think there's an agreement and not think you're going to be held accountable. And to your teams, you should make sure they understand that silence, I'm going to take as agreement. And so if you want to be part of this decision, if you want to have input in the decision, then make sure you are speaking up and sharing. Now, I always also tell people, you may not get what you want, but I can't help you get what you want unless you tell me what you want. And so you get that opportunity to express your input for what direction we should go. And again, it may not go that way, but at least you've leaned into that decision, and then you can live with what we need to do going forward. The other thing that came to mind really quick is we talked about the executives and it being surprising that the level of accountability, the higher you go. I want to go personal for a moment and go outside of corporate America and tell you just how impactful this conversation is. As I was going through my career and learning more about the difference between responsibility and accountability and how that fell on me as a leader and what that looked like, and how, in fact, I should be demonstrating that as a leader. Because if a decision doesn't go right and I don't take accountability for it, then what am I expecting of my team?
Yes.
Talk about creating a culture.
Yes.
There's a culture you're going to create already.
Yes.
One way or the other. You can create the culture that you're looking for, or you can not take accountability as a leader and create a whole different culture where your team is going to be bulletproof and not, Teflon, not taking on any responsibility or accountability. And then it'd be hard to hold them accountable. But as I was going through my journey, I would often have conversations, be on conference calls, and I'd be taking my daughters to and from different events, schools, sporting events, or whatever. And they were young. And they were, without me recognizing it, they were picking up on this language. And so I remember getting off of a conference call where clearly I was not taking responsibility for my actions, and somebody on the other end was trying to hold me accountable, and I just wasn't going for it. I was like, I was probably laying blame and pointing some fingers and the whole nine. I got off that car, and my daughter said, "Dad, can we ask you a question?" I said, "Yeah, sure." And they were like, "So, are you not being responsible?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" They were like, "It sounds like you were pointing fingers at other people, and they were trying to hold you accountable, but it does sound like you were being very responsible." I said, "You know what? First of all, you should not be using what I'm trying to teach you on me. And by the way, you're right. But despite that, you just sit back there and eat your McDonald's or whatever you're eating and stay out of my conversation." So it is not, the point of that is it is not difficult to create this culture. You just have to be deliberate about it. You have to take ownership as a leader for your role in it. And I think you started our conversation with accountability starts with the leader.
Yes.
So important for you to take that away. But it can be done even with small children.
Yes. and it's the more I have operated inside corporate America, the more I realize how much it mirrors other parts of life. It's just people.
Yes.
And so my younger sister, we were talking, and she felt that there was a shock she experienced going to high school because she thought it was going to be like Saved by the Bell. And she was surprised when it wasn't like Saved by the Bell. And a lot of people feel that same way. I know I felt that same way getting into executive leadership because I had this image about what it was going to be like. And as I arrived inside that environment, I realized it's very similar to just about every other environment.
Yes.
The rules are slightly different.
Yes.
But it's just people.
Yes.
And accountability is something that stretches across everything that we do and everything that we are, or at least I believe it should. And exercising accountability does begin with self.
Yes.
And we talked a bit about the restraint that's required when you have authority. And how are you holding yourself accountable to the commitments that you make? Because it does mirror and it does echo. And I really like the framing of be aware of the shadow that you cast as a leader.
Yes.
Because they are watching.
Yes.
Like and it's fascinating. I was in a meeting where I was frustrated, and I was not the best version of Philip. And so earlier, as a town hall, I had my entire organization there. So I'm going to share a mistake that I made in front of my entire organization. So my entire organization's there, 150 people. So, and earlier, in a couple of earlier town halls, I made a commitment. I said, hey, I'm not going to do this. Like, if I need to be here, if I need to do this, this is what I'm going to do. And I made a commitment to my organization. And then I want to say it's probably like 2 meetings later, in a moment of frustration, I said, again, my entire organization's there, I said, well, I don't know what to tell you. I've said this a million times. I don't know what else to tell you. And luckily, one of the individual contributors called me out on it.
Ooh.
Like in front of the entire organization. They said, you said a couple meetings ago, this is how you would behave. And this is not how you're behaving right now. And it brought me up short. And I said, in that moment, you're right. You're 100% right. And I apologize because it was a moment of frustration. And so when I apologized and I said, you're right, let me take that back. What I had just said 10 seconds ago, let me walk that back. You're 100% right. I did make that commitment. I'm going to keep that commitment. And two things came out of that. One, I understood the impact of me losing my temper and losing my composure in public. Now, I knew, intellectually knew, but it's when you make a big mistake like that that you really understand the impact of that. Second is I had several people, individual contributors in the organization, come to me afterwards and say how much they appreciate that, and they'd never in their career seen a vice president apologize.
Wow.
And I was like, I appreciate you recognizing me fixing the mistake. But that doesn't change the fact that I made one.
Yes.
And I hold myself to a higher standard, but I'm human and I fall down.
Yes.
And I appreciate you recognizing that it's okay for me to fall down, and it's also okay for you all to hold me accountable.
Yes. That's good.
And I was so incredibly grateful, so unbelievably grateful, because had he not said something, now I did damage, but it would have been so much more to the culture that I wanted to create of accountability. Because then when I start talking about accountability, it'd be they would think I was talking out of both sides of my face.
Right.
And so what he gave me was the opportunity to show, yes, I too will be held accountable.
Yes.
So we talked about building a culture of accountability, the difference between accountability and responsibility, and that responsibility can be shared, but accountability must be owned by one person, and that it really begins with you. It begins with self. And accountability from a leadership perspective is about creating the environment, providing the language, the framework, and you know you have it when the team begins to use it with each other in a safe way. So, thank you.
Excellent.
Thanks for tuning in to Leadership Unfiltered. We hope you have found value in our conversation and are ready to take action in your leadership journey. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, share, and leave us a review. And don't forget to connect with us on social media for more leadership insights and resources. Until next time, keep leading with purpose.